Briefly, I'd talk about what I call the best military I've served with since 1968, and that's our young men and women who serve right now. Extraordinary people who've paid the ultimate sacrifice, who've been wounded, and whose lives have changed forever, who have families that have been unbelievable in terms of their support, without whom we wouldn't be close to where we are in either one of these two fights. And to whom I believe, particularly for those who've given so much, we owe an eternal debt. And it's the kind of thing that we need to focus on, I think, as a country, to make sure that those who sacrifice so much are well cared for, not just by the Department of Defense or the VA when they return, but literally by communities throughout the land. They have gone to war, sacrificed much, done what we have asked them to do, and we owe them a great debt, not just of gratitude. We need to ensure that their American dream still has a future, and it's pretty simple. They want to go to school, they'd like to get married and have kids, they'd like a job, and they want to own a house. It's not complex, it's just the path has changed. And then speaking to the force, which is we're about to start deploying our major units for the 5th long deployment. And if you start in 2001, 2002, and the way I tell this story is, if I'm a 10-year-old in 2002, and my father went off to war, and he's now coming up on his 5th major deployment, and I just went off to college. And think about the impact of that on a family, and the extraordinary strength of our families to basically be able to absorb that. They have paid a huge price as well. And so I'm very mindful of the stress. We're obviously extremely concerned about the increase in numbers of suicides, the kinds of other pressures that our members are under, and we've really taken significant steps to try to address those. But the operational tempo, certainly over the next couple of years, is not going to put us into a position where we're going to be home twice as long as we are deployed. And that's our goal. The Marine Corps actually be there in about a year. But it'll probably be 2.5, 3 years before the Army is, based on expectations for deployments right now. So they've sacrificed tremendously and performed exceptionally well. They are resilient, both on the military side and the family side, and they have become, and that family piece has become much more integral to our readiness than it ever has been, and it needs to be that way for the future. The last area I just talked briefly about is there's the rest of the world out there as well, and it's not going away, and we need to, I think, continue to be engaged and involved, whether it's in our own hemisphere, which I often speak to, certainly the very visible challenges that exist in our southern neighbor Mexico, and in Latin America. And I was raised someone that was trained to look east and west. Even being raised in Southern California, I didn't look south very much. And yet, in the global world that we're living in right now, I think we have to focus more and more there as well. So there are challenges associated with Latin America. Certainly the emergence of China, and what does that mean? And the economic, and I pay a lot of attention to the economic engines, whether it's China or India or Europe or us or Brazil. And what does that mean to the future? Because I think in the long run, it's going to be those engines that really drive outcomes. And so it's important that we pay a lot of attention to what's going on in other parts of the world. We stood up last, I guess about a year and a half ago now, AFRICOM, for the sole purpose of being able to focus our engagement strategy from the military perspective on Africa, which is a wonderful continent of great resources, wonderful people, and huge challenges, whether it's famine or disease. And I think the world needs to be engaged there. So, and then as I look to the rest of the world, I also try to keep my head up and look to what does the United States military look like after these two wars. I always worry about fighting the last war, and for where we're going, these will be the last wars, and how much of this is relevant for the future, and what kind of training, equipment, people, what's the size of the force, and what our readiness requirements will be, and where we'll be operating is very much on my mind as well. And it's pretty difficult sometimes to pick out in that crystal ball exactly what's going to happen. We don't have a very good track record for predicting, but a balanced force that is ready and trained and able to adapt very rapidly to emerging circumstances is absolutely critical. And I think we're going to need to be, as a force, I've used the characteristics of our special forces. We're going to need to be lighter, lethal, adaptable, flexible, more timely, an ability to match the speed of war, which I think we have achieved in the current fight. Quite frankly, we were way behind when these wars started, and we've now achieved that, but we've got to get ahead of it. And that doesn't even look at other possibilities that are significant, for instance, in space, in the cyber world, et cetera. So, as was indicated in the introduction, we live in times that are enormously challenging. I want to reassure you that what I said before is fundamental to me getting up every single day. This is the best military we've ever had, and I have great confidence in them. But we're also living in a time where it's not all about the military. The military would like to be the supporting entity and to lead in our policy, to be a supporting part of our overall policy globally, and certainly not engaged from the standpoint of conflict, but engaged from the standpoint of being preventative, so that in fact these kinds of conflicts don't break out.